Most men move through life unaware that they are being assessed constantly, not loudly, not openly, quietly, in glances that linger half a second too long, in pauses before a reply, in the way people adjust their posture when you enter a room. Every day, power is exchanged without words, and most people don't even realize they're losing it. Listen carefully now. What you're about to hear isn't common knowledge, isn't rewarded by society, and isn't meant to feel safe. This is information that stays hidden because once it lands, you can't return to comfort or ignorance. And ignorance is exactly what keeps people predictable. You already sense more than you think you do. That feeling when something in a conversation feels misaligned, when someone's words say one thing, but their presence says another. That isn't intuition or guesswork. It's raw perception that was never sharpened. You were never shown how to interpret it. From childhood, you were trained to believe language is truth, that words are the main signal, that if someone says the right thing, they mean it. But Nietzsche warned that language is often camouflage. People rarely speak from honesty. They speak from self-preservation, from fear of losing status, from ego, from the need to belong. What most call personality is not essence, it's protection. A constructed shell shaped by whatever helps someone survive rejection, criticism, or invisibility. The overly agreeable person may not be kind at all. They may be desperate to avoid abandonment. The one who appears unshakable may be holding themselves together by sheer force, hoping no one looks too closely. The most deceptive part is this. People usually don't know they're performing. They didn't design the role consciously. They adapted. They learned which expressions were safe, which opinions were rewarded, which reactions prevented pain. Most people are playing a character that once protected them and now traps them. That's why they aren't hiding from you. They're hiding from themselves. Nietzsche said that every deep spirit needs a mask, not as an insult, but as a warning. If you confuse the outer layer for the core, you'll misunderstand everything that follows. Here's what almost no one tells you. The truth escapes constantly, not through statements, but through fractures, in the glance that breaks too early, in the laugh that lasts a beat too long, in the sudden change of topic when the conversation moves too close to something real. The first psychological truth is simple and uncomfortable. Everyone wears a mask to function, not because they're false, but because they're afraid. Society rewards certain behaviors and punishes others. So people shape themselves accordingly. But no mask fits perfectly forever. Pressure exposes seams. The earliest sign of authenticity is discomfort. Notice what makes someone tense. That's where the real person starts to appear. The second truth cuts deeper. What someone despises in others often points directly to what they refuse to face in themselves. When a person relentlessly mocks arrogance, there is often unresolved insecurity underneath. When someone is obsessed with exposing dishonesty, they're usually avoiding a truth of their own. We attack externally what threatens us internally. So if you want to understand someone, don't just observe what they praise. Study what provokes them, and how quickly. The third truth is quieter but more revealing. Silence carries more information than speech. Nietzsche didn't trust endless talking. He saw words as something people hide behind. When someone hesitates before answering, when they give rehearsed responses to deep questions, when they avoid certain topics altogether. That absence of sound is speaking. Avoided vulnerability maps fear with precision. The fourth truth is one most people resist. Loud morality often conceals ego. Be cautious around those who constantly advertise their virtue, the ones who correct, preach, and position themselves as morally elevated. Nietzsche saw this as power disguised as righteousness. Sometimes ethics become armor for superiority. Genuine integrity doesn't need witnesses. When virtue demands applause, something else is usually being protected. The fifth truth shifts how you see deception entirely. People rarely deceive you first. They deceive themselves. The phrases you hear constantly, "I'm fine," "I'm over it," "I don't care. These aren't weapons aimed outward, they're shields aimed inward," repeated so often they become belief. Nietzsche understood self-deception as survival, not malice, a way to remain functional in a world that hurt too early or too deeply. So when someone's story has gaps, don't assume manipulation. Those inconsistencies are the map. The sixth truth reveals the illusion of dominance. Where you see superiority, look for inferiority beneath it. Excessive self-promotion is often compensation. Constant reminders of achievement usually mask fear of inadequacy. Casual belittling often hides terror of being overlooked. Real confidence doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to compete. When someone needs to control, to dominate, to prove, look past the surface. Behind authority, you'll often find a frightened child wearing symbols of power. Learning to read people isn't about condemnation. It's about clarity. When someone interrupts constantly, it isn't always arrogance. It may be fear of vanishing. When someone broadcasts happiness obsessively, it may be an unspoken plea. When someone says they're fine while avoiding eye contact, the body is telling the truth the mouth won't. These insights aren't tools for manipulation. They're lenses for understanding, and the clearer you see, the less reactive you become. Nietzsche's intention was never control. It was awakening. To stop being deceived by appearances and start connecting with what's real. If you've ever felt like you were only seeing the surface of people, if you've ever sensed there was more happening beneath a smile or a sentence, you've already witnessed this. The brief flicker of discomfort when beliefs are challenged, the subtle shift in tone when a topic gets too close, the laugh that doesn't align with the words. These aren't errors, they're signals, and once you learn to read them, you realize people aren't mysterious. They're guarded. Not because they're dangerous, because they're afraid of being seen. In the first part, we uncovered how people construct identities to stay safe in the world. Now we move into more dangerous territory. This is where those identities begin to fracture. Nietzsche didn't see the self as solid or fixed. He saw it as something assembled under pressure, a role learned through trial and pain, held together only as long as it isn't threatened. The moment that role is challenged, the truth starts to seep through. Almost everything people do is fueled by fear, even when it doesn't look like it. That's where we begin, because this force is everywhere. Most behavior isn't guided by desire, but by anxiety operating below awareness. Notice how some people over-explain simple things, while others dominate the conversation or vanish the moment attention shifts. Watch how often people agree when every signal says they want to refuse. These aren't personality quirks. They're fear responses. Fear of being rejected, replaced, embarrassed, exposed, or forgotten. Nietzsche understood that humans rarely move toward what they want. They move away from what they're terrified of losing: status, belonging, love, self-respect. So if you want to read someone accurately, stop listening to what they claim to want and start tracking what they're guarding. What would break them if it disappeared? That pressure point is where their truth lives. Criticism offers another clear signal if you know how to look at it. When someone is constantly pointing out flaws in others, that judgment usually isn't aimed outward. It's reflected inward. The person who ridicules sensitivity often hasn't made peace with their own emotions. The one who attacks appearances may be locked in a private battle with their own reflection. Nietzsche believed judgment is rarely about correction. It's about distance. By attacking a trait in someone else, people try to separate themselves from the part of them they don't want to acknowledge. Repeated criticism is not commentary. It's exposure. If you trace it carefully, it will lead you straight to the wound they're avoiding. Then there's confidence, which is often misunderstood. You've met the type who seems unshakable, always certain, always composed, always prepared with an answer. But if you watch closely, the body gives them away. The tight jaw, the rigid posture, the defensiveness when questioned. Nietzsche observed this pattern in figures of authority. People who perform certainty because uncertainty feels unbearable. Excessive confidence often hides unresolved guilt or shame, something unprocessed, something buried. Real inner calm doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't need to perform. So when someone appears overly confident, don't assume strength. Look for what they're trying to outrun. Another subtle signal appears in exaggeration. This one is easy to miss until you recognize it. When someone speaks in extremes, it's rarely because they're sure. It's because they're compensating. The person who insists they don't care what anyone thinks usually cares deeply. The one who claims constant happiness is often suppressing the opposite. Exaggeration is volume turned up to drown out doubt. Nietzsche saw imbalance, not intensity, as the warning sign. When statements become absolute, the insecurity underneath is usually loud. The words are trying to silence something. Control reveals even more. Everyone seeks some control, but obsession with it is different. When a person needs to manage every detail, resist change, or dominate situations and people, it's not a display of power. It's a response to inner disorder. Nietzsche recognized that when the internal world feels unstable, people try to impose structure on everything outside themselves. Control becomes a substitute for peace. The tighter the grip on the environment, the more fragile the inner state usually is. Instead of fearing controlling people, see what's really there. Someone who believes that if they loosen their hold, everything will collapse. One of Nietzsche's most haunting insights becomes impossible to ignore once you see it. The louder the performance, the emptier the center. Look at how many lives are lived as exhibitions. Constant updates, perfect images, endless signals saying, "Look at me, validate me, confirm I exist." This isn't confidence, it's hunger. People perform when they don't believe they're enough without the spotlight. Noise replaces connection. Drama replaces depth. Someone who is whole doesn't need to broadcast their existence. When life becomes a stage, it's not power on display. It's need asking to be seen. By now, you may feel something shifting. You enter a room and behavior starts to speak before words do. You notice someone interrupting repeatedly and recognize the fear of being overlooked. You hear endless boasting and sense the insecurity beneath it. This isn't mind reading, it's pattern recognition. You're learning to see the structure behind behavior, and with that ability comes responsibility. Because once you see clearly, you can't return to surface-level judgments. You start to realize how much quiet suffering hides behind confident expressions and polished routines. This awareness isn't meant to give you leverage. It's meant to give you stability. When you recognize the child behind the critic, the fear behind the aggressor, the shame behind arrogance, you stop being easily shaken. And this is only the second layer. What comes next goes deeper. In the final part, we'll uncover how early wounds shape adult identities, how childhood experiences echo through ambition, envy, withdrawal, and the need to be remembered. You'll learn the final truths that reveal not just how people behave, but why. And as you begin to understand them, you'll recognize yourself more clearly too. Because beneath every action is a belief, and beneath every belief is a story that began long before adulthood. Nietzsche didn't just show patterns. He traced them back to their origin. Now we finish the descent. People like to believe they speak from reason, that their opinions are built on facts, evidence, clear thinking. But look closer and you'll see something else moving underneath. Nietzsche understood that logic is usually the mask, not the source. Beneath every argument lives an old bruise. Someone says love is an illusion, that loyalty is a lie, that trust is weakness. They sound confident, detached, rational, but they're not reporting truth. They're sealing a wound. Beliefs are often bandages we wrap around experiences that cut too deep. People feel first, then build explanations that make the pain feel justified. So if you really want to understand someone, don't debate their ideas. Trace them. Ask what moment taught them this lesson. Ask what feeling they're trying to avoid ever experiencing again. When you do that, their certainty softens. Their anger makes sense. Their words stop feeling like attacks and start looking like armor. And once you see that, you stop reacting to the surface. You start reading the source. If you want to see who someone truly is, don't watch how they behave around those with influence. Power reveals nothing new. It only flatters. Watch what happens when they encounter weakness. someone who cannot fight back, someone who makes a mistake, someone who is exposed. Nietzsche believed real strength doesn't need to crush. It has the option to and chooses not to. A person who laughs at vulnerability is often running from their own. A person who punishes small errors likely grew up where mistakes cost love. A person who always has to win may still be reliving a war that ended years ago. But the one who can stay calm in the presence of fragility, who can sit with discomfort without striking, who can forgive when retaliation would be easy, that person has already conquered themselves. So if you want to read someone clearly, give them a moment where kindness is available. Their choice in that moment will tell you more than their words ever could. There's another pattern that hides in plain sight. Some people are always loud without realizing it. They fill every silence. They dress to be noticed. They turn every story into a spotlight. From a distance, it looks like confidence, like presence, like power. But Nietzsche saw a different engine driving this behavior, a quiet terror of being erased, of passing through life unnoticed, of existing without proof. When someone fears disappearing, they create noise. Not because they enjoy it, but because silence feels like death. Often this begins early. A child who wasn't seen becomes an adult who demands visibility. Instead of asking for love directly, they perform for it. They provoke it. They manufacture reactions just to feel real. So when you encounter someone who feels overwhelming, don't rush to label them arrogant. Ask what they believe will happen if they stop trying so hard to be seen. Sometimes excess isn't ego, it's survival. Pay attention to who people target. Not everyone attacks out of hatred. Sometimes the sharpest criticism comes from a place of longing. Nietzsche understood that envy rarely announces itself honestly. It disguises itself as mockery, moral judgment, or dismissal. The person who tears down the confident man, the free woman, the successful creator may not despise them. They may be staring at a version of themselves they never became. It's easier to destroy what reminds you of what you abandoned than to admit you still want it. So the attack becomes a shortcut, a way to shrink the mirror. Envy is unspoken desire mixed with shame. It says, I wish I could, but I don't believe I'm allowed. When you see this clearly, insults lose their sting. And when you catch it in yourself, something unlocks. Because desire acknowledged can transform. Desire denied only poisons. People often think they act according to their values, but more often they're acting out old roles. Nietzsche believed humans don't change easily. They repeat. They replay dynamics learned before they had words for them. The child who is ignored becomes the adult who interrupts. The child who is punished for emotion becomes the adult who hides behind logic. The child who had to earn affection becomes the adult who overgives, overperforms, overstays in broken relationships. They tell themselves stories about principles and beliefs, but underneath, the script was written long ago. Behavior is history in motion. So when you want to read someone, don't just observe what they do now. Ask what kind of environment taught them this was necessary. Behind every adult pattern is a younger self still trying to stay safe. This leads to the final truth, and it's the one that ties everything together. People may lie with words, but they confess through repetition. Watch what keeps happening in their lives. The one who vanishes when closeness appears. The one who stays busy to avoid being alone with their thoughts. The one who flirts constantly, but never lets anyone in. These aren't accidents. They're signals. Each repeated behavior is a message saying, this is how I learned to survive. This is where I was hurt. This is what I'm protecting. Nietzsche believed that if you stop listening only to what people say and start listening to what they repeat, the truth becomes impossible to miss. And when you see it, something shifts in you. You stop taking things personally. You stop needing to strike back. You stop turning understanding into a weapon. You become steady. You see clearly and still choose restraint. That is real power. By now, it should be obvious that none of these truths were only about other people. They were reflections. Every pattern you recognized exists somewhere in you too. Your defenses, your habits, your automatic reactions. The clearer your vision becomes, the harder it is to pretend otherwise. And that's not a curse, it's an invitation. This way of seeing doesn't end with observation, it begins with awareness. Nietzsche didn't want passive spectators, he wanted awake individuals. People who understood that judgment reveals inner conflict, that admiration reveals buried desire, that irritation points to unfinished business. When you understand this, you stop living on the surface. You stop wearing masks you didn't choose. If something in this series made you uncomfortable, that's a signal. If something felt familiar, that's another. Pay attention to what stirred. Share which of these truths struck you the deepest. Not to impress, but to be honest. And if this way of seeing resonates with you, stay. This isn't content, it's training your perception, learning to see what's hidden, learning to recognize the soul beneath behavior, and through that, remembering who you actually are.